Western nations must do more to help Rohingya Muslims who've been forced to flee. Sky's Phil Edwards reports.
The Rohingya Muslims are desperate to escape to Bangladesh, and many of them are dying as they try. More than 400,000 refugees have crossed the border in the past 3 weeks. That's more than the total number of refugees from various locations that fled to Europe in 2016. These satellite images show why they're fleeing. Proof, allegedly, that the Burmese military has been burning Rohingya villages in Myanmar. There are 1 million Rohingya Muslims living in Burma's Rakhine state. For decades, the government's refused to recognise them as citizens. Human rights group Amnesty International has accused the international community of inaction, claiming that as Western nations fail to play their part, poorer nations are left to pick up the pieces.
It requires a response not just from Bangladesh but the international community as a whole. There is no way that one state can deal with this sort of influx in such a short period of time. What we would be expecting from international donors, including those in the West who have the resources, is to be able to support Bangladesh in dealing with the immediate issue, which is the humanitarian one. The conditions when I was on the border were absolutely dire.
Sky News has filmed many of them over the border in Bangladesh, where they've gone for safety. For 5 years, Rakhine State in Myanmar has been divided along ethnic and religious lines, but the current violence is the worst yet.
I don't recall seeing anything as awful, as terrible as I am seeing here. The crimes against humanity, the ethnic cleansing for which the government of Burma is responsible, are like nothing I've witnessed before.
Myanmar's army says around 400 people have died in the violence, among them 370 Rohingya militants. But accounts from survivors in Bangladesh and from displaced Buddhists who fled to the state capital indicate the death toll may be much higher. Phil Edwards, Sky News.
Joining me now in the studio to talk about the big stories we'll be covering throughout the day here on Sky News. It's the return of former RAF navigator John Nichol and psychologist Linda Papadopoulos. Welcome back both. Again. And we're going to start by talking about the Parsons Green tube attack that happened on Friday. The investigations gathered pace over the weekend and it's resulted in 2 arrests. CCTV footage that's emerged this morning of this figure appearing to carry the carrier bag that contained the bomb. And just 21 years old, John, one of those arrested in connection, Yahya Farouk. The other is an 18-year-old, both believed to have been involved in foster care in this country.
And we've asked this question on so many occasions over the last 3 or 4 years on this programme. What has happened? What has happened in their lives? What has happened in their education? Who has affected them so that the normality of a situation of carrying a bag, that your intent is to kill women, children, men, going about their business, going to school.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Deal with that.
I think if you kind of lessons from history, right? If you kind of look at any group that has hurt another group, the first thing you do is you dehumanize, right? So you begin to call them by a different name and you begin to turn them into something not human. And I just kind of looking at that, we were speaking before this, like you're holding a bag, right? And you're thinking, oh, I'm going to set it down next to who? The mother in the pram, the kids, the guy on his way. But I think in order to do something like that, you have to kind of stand outside. You have to feel that you have justice on your side, that you're doing something right. I think the other side that I want to pick up on, though, is that people doing this, especially young people doing this, couldn't do it without the access to information of how to do this online. You know, you have cookbooks on how to build these things, like fairy lights and little bags. That's truly unbelievable. Surely there must be a way to crack down on at least that, no?
Well, these 2 young men are suspects at this time, but, you know, in the pattern of what we've seen in other attacks, of course, they have been young men, and it is the same questions we ask time and time again. again, what gets them to that point? We'll be exploring that throughout the day here on Sky News. In the meantime, we're going to talk about Uber. Earlier on, I spoke to Steve Garelick, who's the secretary for the GMB Professional Drivers branch of that union. And he's handing in a petition today, over 100,000 signatures, asking for Uber drivers to have better workers' rights. And I asked him why Uber drivers still work for the company if the working conditions are so bad.
They're willing to work because they have no other alternative, and the marketplace has seen itself stripped of other options. And the reality is a lot of them are having to work because they've already committed into things like vehicles, into heavy insurance policies, and the fact that there's no alternative once they're locked into those type of contracts.
John, it was interesting. I also asked Steve, is it up to passengers in terms of we're driven by price on everything, whether it be taxi journeys, clothes, supermarket shopping. We want the best deal. We want the cheapest price.
And that's the reality. I mean, I absolutely understand the argument. And you step into this debate, especially in London, knowing that you're going to get a bit of abuse if you ever side with anything to do with Uber. But I'm afraid the reality is that, especially young people with their phones, and getting an Uber home at midnight is a lot cheaper. And I understand all the arguments about whether there's a danger or whether it's professional, whether there's insurance.
Yeah,
but it's about the price.
20 quid is a lot different to 50 quid, isn't it, Linda?
That's what people go for.
And I think this is it. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You want a tech economy, then it has to be different to the models that we're used to. And like you say, I don't think I'm coming down on either side here, but we have to decide if we're going to have, this accessibility to more people doing it, then it has to take a hit somewhere. I think for me, the big thing is safety. It always comes back to safety, right? So how tired are these drivers? Are there different, I don't know, are there different regulations? Of how many hours you're doing, at least, if there isn't a 0-hour contract, there's a finite amount, I'm guessing, of hours you can work.
Well, I'm not even sure that there is.
Or maybe there isn't. But, CRB, all of